So they are so good.
It's on.
No, we turn out about 4 hours a day. And that gets their circulatory thing going. And yeah, and then we make sure that
Pretty picture.
It changes every hour.
it's
They all happen to be the same girl.
Anyway, well, now this is the thing. I had like 5 years. I'm right here.
It was slippery. So do you like one?
Yeah, all day long, all yesterday. So, when it gets choice, that's one of the real. Yeah, according to. We've had some, you know, we have this writing layout. Yeah.
Go on, all right. Good evening, everybody. It's great to see you here tonight. I appreciate everybody coming out on this beautiful evening. One of our favorites of being here is the wonderful winter weather. So I'm excited for it at least. Mr. Marisol, well, thank you for joining us tonight. So this is the third, I think, of our town hall listening session in support of the redevelopment or rewrite or new edition of the City of Harper Springs zoning code. I think everybody online is muted. Maybe Margie, you're not. If you could possibly keep yourself muted online when you're not talking, that would be helpful. And again, thanks for everybody coming out. I know it's a little challenging to get here tonight in this weather, but I do appreciate it. So my name for, oh, sorry.
I was going to ask you if you want to introduce yourself.
That's next on my list. So my name, for those of you who don't know me, is Tony Johnson. I am a planning commission member or member of the planning commission. I've been on the planning commission for about 15 months now. So I came in at the end of 23 when there was an opening. I am a year-round resident and a registered voter in the city. Tonight we have 2 other planning commission members with us. Our chair, Bill Mulder, and our new member, Chip Everest, over here. And then also, back for her 3rd appearance as scribe, we have Marie Wayman. So thank you again, Marie, for scribing again. She's done a wonderful job already, and I look forward to having her take all of our notes tonight.
Thank you. I just say a couple words about myself. I am a full-time resident here. I live on East 3rd Street, and I've lived here full-time for about 10 years. And prior to that, we just owned our property and we drove up and down I-75 every other weekend for about 20 years. So we've been here for 30 years off and on, now full-time. So I'm just gonna try to scribe everything that you say. I'll write as fast. I can't say I will write as legibly as possible. Sometimes it's kind of weird, but I do encourage you, if I don't get it right, or if you know, just want to say something more, let me know. I mean, this is really an open kind of thing. And then at the end, we'll post it. And if there's something that you want to add or correct, please do that. And then I transcribe it and give it all to Bill. So anyway, thank you. Welcome.
Great. Thank you, Marie. So I also wanted to make it clear, this is not a planning commission meeting. This is an informational, talking, listening section. So it's much less formal. We don't have to comply with all of the normal rules and regulations. So it's here to have an open format so we can have a conversation. So everybody's got a job here tonight. And your role as participants is so we can hear what concerns or questions you have about the zoning process, the new code that was recalled, the old code, what's good, what's bad, what's your concern, so we can kind of get those down on paper and help guide the development of the zoning code here for the city. We want to hear about things that you've maybe heard from other people and you're concerned about, or your questions about, or you want to know if it's true. I mean, these are things that'd be great to get on the table so we can have those conversations. But most importantly, things that you're concerned about is really what we want to hear. My role tonight is to facilitate the conversation, keep everybody on task, jump in the middle when we get into a fist fight, whatever that might be. And make sure that we're listening to your thoughts and that everybody has an opportunity to weigh in and everybody has a chance to be heard. So we want to make sure that your voice is heard in this process, and we want to make sure that you can help guide the development of the new zoning code. So we have a code that makes sense and works for all of the stakeholders and people that need to use that code. So I know we can get to a point where we have majority consensus in this process. And this is why we're having these meetings, so we can try and open up that forum as much as possible for people to have input. So we can come up with a code that has general agreement and it will benefit all the interested parties. But we need your help to make this happen, and that's why we're here tonight. So Marie's going to take notes as we go through, so we capture your concerns and comments. And then we're going to start off with Bill making a kind of a 10-minute presentation. I encourage you to listen to that presentation. There's some pretty interesting thought-provoking concepts in there, maybe a couple of alarming things. So keep those in mind. Feel free to take some notes, and then we'll go around the room afterwards, and everybody who wants to have a say can jump in and let us know your thoughts. So from that, I'm going to turn it over to Bill to do the presentation.
Great. As Tony said, the purpose of this meeting is to provide background about the zoning code update considerations, and most importantly, to hear your opinions and ideas for the planning commission. And the big question is, why consider updating our zoning code? There's been a lot of action about it, over the past year or so, including the repeal of the zoning code that the planning commission recommended and city council approved. And so then why tackle it again? That's really the big question. And here's why. To improve the clarity and usability for residents, staff, and professionals, to anticipate the future needs of our residents, to reduce bureaucratic processes and costs for residents, to sync with the city's master plan and future land use map. And then the zoning code has some significant gaps and risks as it's kind of left over from a long time ago. Let's go into those right now. First of all, biggest gap is its format structure and some of the content confusing, it's difficult to use, and it's clearly outdated. And why would that matter to a regular old resident? It does matter because if you want to do anything with your property, you're going to need to know what the rules are. City staff needs to be able to work with it. Your builder, your architect, everybody who's going to come in contact with your property needs to be able to figure out what the rules are. And then,
Could I just jump in for a second? One of the really interesting points I took away from the meeting last night was that the old zoning code, or the 2005 zoning code, or whatever we're calling it, was described last night as a patchwork. It's started in the 70s and had things added to it and taken away, and it's kind of, almost like an old website. It has some broken links, and that's some of the problems we're trying to address. Sorry, Bill.
Yeah, and it's not format, structure, and content is administrative stuff that's not exciting to residents, but really there's no excuse for not having a usable, legible, workable document. Anyway, and then in terms of risks, the community is vulnerable to some possibly undesirable uses that are in the zoning code. First one is that adult-oriented businesses are allowed in the central business district with special land use approval. Mobile homes are allowed in the R1B, R1C, and R2 residential districts. Those are our largest by geography. And someone could put a mobile home on their lot with special land use approval. And conversely, in the mobile home park district, we allow single-family detached dwellings as well as mobile homes. We also allow rooming houses in the R1C residential district. Shipping containers, for instance, could be used as a construction method or for storage on site. No approval would be required for either of those. Someone could use a shipping container as a shed on their property, for instance. And there's no hard limit for building height in the central business district. There's a 30-foot stated limit, but it's undefined what a rooftop elevator and stairway housing could be, up to potentially 10 feet. So those are the risks that I've identified. There's some judgment in here. You may not feel the risks, and you may like them, and that's fine. And we'll be talking through all those things. Some additional gaps and risks are that there are no architectural standards for downtown buildings. We heard a lot during the summer about keeping downtown the way it is, keeping it charming. People felt they liked it the way it is. And there is nothing that actually talks about architectural standards. So, some people may favor regulation like that. Some people may not, but we don't have it today. There are some modern business types that are not permitted because the code is aged, and these types of businesses weren't even envisioned when the definitions were developed. So a couple of quick examples are brew pubs and tasting rooms. We've got one sentence about floodplain protections for residents, and then there's a bunch more wording in the city code, and that seems to be outdated, citing 1981 maps. That's a big deal now as we're learning more about flooding, and we've got a whole new definition from the federal government about where our flood risk is in the city. We don't have any shoreline protection requirements that are recommended now by the Watershed Council, nor do we have any up-to-date dark sky lighting standards. And then front porch requests are common with the Zoning Board of Appeals, where people ask for the ability to extend the depth of their front porch. And there are homes that have been here a lot of years where the front setbacks as defined wouldn't permit that. And it's a pretty benign request. And those are the kinds of things that Planning Commission often moves into the zoning code when it becomes a trend. And then finally, restrictions on our what we call guest quarters in the zoning code. Those are guest cottages and mother-in-law apartments, accessory dwelling units. And the rules are that only family and friends may stay in there. They can only stay for 21 days, and then they have to go away for a month before they come back. And there are those special privileges for the biggest properties, which are in R1A and R1E residential zoning districts. And there, the owners' domestic employees are allowed to stay, and there's no time limit on any guests stay. So those are things that I've identified that might be interesting to you and that you might see as a gap or a risk or not. But that's the thinking about why it would make sense to update the zoning code. And then here is a page from the zoning code, just to give you an example of, let's see if I can zoom in. Oops. So this is the most important set of regulations for a homeowner. And this is how it looks in today's zoning code. So if you're talking with your builder and you say, oh boy, I'd like to put an addition on, or I sure would like a shed, this is what you're going to have to figure out with them. And chances are you're not going to get it at a glance. And you're going to have to call Jeff Grimm, our zoning administrator, and he's going to have to translate it for you. And so the question is, do we owe our residents better than that? And we could certainly give them better than that. So then the question is, why consider updating it now? Didn't we go through this? And didn't people say that they didn't like what the Planning Commission recommended? And they did. But here are some considerations for you to think about. Number one, those gaps and risks from the previous slides can definitely be addressed. And Planning Commission will be talking about, should they be addressed? Should they be addressed ASAP, or can they linger for a while? Knowledge of zoning issues and engagement in the community is very high due to all the conversation that we've had. And ultimately, this is likely to be a 15-month plus cycle from January of 2024. Karen Offield has a different position on this, that she said education really started more like maybe late summer. Yeah, that's a fair assessment. So anyway, it will have been a number of months and would have been a number of months. The question is, should we attack it now, and how fast should we attack it? My thought is that residents are pretty fed up with all this, and they expect us all to work together to develop a good solution. And a good solution is quite possible, in my view. So this is the rationale that I believe makes sense, but we can talk next about what you think. Here are the zoning code aspects that the public has kind of nominated for us to take a look at, and are all the important things that make a difference. Number of zoning districts, the boundaries, setbacks, et cetera, and the building height things that are big one. So those are what we'll go after. And then here's our community engagement calendar. We're having 5 town hall meetings like this next a period of about 3 weeks, and then 5 open houses. The open houses are just drop-in format. Anybody can come in and just have a conversation. The thought is that maybe they'd be more appealing to folks that wouldn't want to come down and sit in the meeting and have to see a presentation of this. And we're going to have a couple of those open houses outside of City Hall. One will be at the Historic Society, one will be at Holy Childhood Church. Also, the next town hall listening session is at a different time of day. It's going to be 10:30 to 11:30 in the morning next Thursday. So I'm just trying to see if we can pick up other folks that might be more available during the day. Here's the timeline and next steps that Planning Commission has laid out, with first meeting tomorrow night to begin discussion of confirm that we want to make some updates. 2, how fast we want to do it. 3, how we should do it, and maybe start getting into some of the details. And 2 more meetings in February, and then 2 in March also, which would be a final review, and then a public hearing on March 20th. And if all that went, then we potentially hand it off to City Council at that point. City Council is the decision maker on this thing, and then they could run their own schedule, whatever that may be. All right, time for discussion.
All right.
Thought-provoking questions here, but you probably have your own ideas about what we should talk about.
So anybody's welcome to jump in with a question or a comment or a concern. If you could just quickly state your name and your address, that'd be great. Just so we all know who's talking. Karen.
Karen Onfield, Birchwood. So just in terms of your presentation, thank you so much, Bill. The aspects of the zoning, it would be great if that list could be updated after these 3 meetings, so that it reflects the listening that you've taken during these times.
This one?
Yeah.
Okay.
And the calendar, we heard a lot of complaints, maybe not a lot, a couple, that they said that they would love to see it on the big calendar, because they don't know where the little calendar is. And so if it's possible, we could put it in red ink on the big calendar where all the other meetings are, and then have that available for everyone. And then just to explain my idea about the 15-month cycle, when it rolled out in February 8th, we spent several months getting everybody involved in terms of knowing that there was something that was happening. We had protest petitions, we had these change petitions, we had these referendum things, and then we had the vote. And so it wasn't really until the middle of the summer when we were really explaining to people. Before we were trying to get people's attention, and then we started to explain to people what the things were. And so the 15-month, I think, is a sort of a longer stretch, but that's just from my point of view. Thank you.
Can I ask a question so I can get it down? When you say we, what we are you talking about?
I'm talking about we from the We Love Harbor Springs, and we from the community that always contacted us, calls us up, emails us.
Okay,
Thank you.
anything else, Karen?
Not right now.
Chris?
Could I ask you a question? So, I see a lot of, folks have attended before, so thank you for caring enough to come out now. What about the calendar of this? What advantages and disadvantages do you see? Yes, ma'am.
Bill, Susan Clark on Bluff Drive. I've always been interested in city stuff, so I always go to the city, the city email and check everything out. And really, I was aware of this a year ago, that it was, that things are going to change, or you were looking to change. I thought the city did, and the planning commission did a really good job. If you're interested, then it's partly your responsibility as a good citizen to find out what's going on, call the city if you have, I've called Victor several times thinking, okay, is this, whatever. But when people say, well, let's just keep it the same way. Last night, Jeff Grimm, I went home to Robert and I said, I learned something tonight. Would you tell the story about if I want to do a porn shop right now in downtown Harbor Springs, I can do that. And I could, and because it's not in the zoning that I can't. And so to me, that's a reason right there to change or to redo the zoning commission or whatever you want to call it, to change that law. So I don't, you can't really, how long ago was it when we did this zoning? 30 years ago? Wasn't it 71?
Well,
Yeah.
I think there's
Ask.
a couple of good points that you brought up that I think we should clarify, right? One, and this is actually something, Bill, that has come up a couple of times where people have, contacted me with a couple of questions or comments like, well, why can't we just leave it the same as it always has been? Or when did we adopt it last? Around the 1970s is when the Michigan passed their Zoning Enabling Act and Planning Enabling Act in their first iterations. And that really provided local municipalities the ability to create their own zoning code. And so in 1976, the city adopted our first actual zoning code. We did have ordinances that had, various other, rules and regulations that the city had to follow. And actually, some people have brought me in some of that old information. Somebody provided me, I think it was the city code, which had some zoning ordinance in it from the 1950s. So we've had ordinances and regulations, but we really adopted our zoning code in 1976. However, since 1976, we have had major updates to it, let's say every 5 to 10 years or so, but we've also had minor updates to it frequently in between. And if you actually look in our zoning code, I can't remember if it's at the front or at the back, but we have a list of every single time we've changed and a link to what part of the code was changed on there. So our 2005 zoning code that we have that was originally adopted in 1976 has been changed, I think, almost 200 times with various iterations and updates to it, because as our community grows and changes, we have to adopt and modify. Otherwise, we would still have language telling us what side of the street horses have to be on or things like that, right? And then our map as well. If you look at our existing zoning map that goes with the 2005 zoning code, on the map directly, you will see little numbers on it. And then if you look at the upper left is a list of what that number corresponds to, and that's identifying the ordinance and the change to the zoning map. And you can see from that, we've changed the zoning map itself approximately 40 times. So we've been monitoring and updating this as we've needed throughout time. It hasn't, so the comment, let's keep it the same. Well, the same as which version is, I guess, my question. But specifically to your comment about sexually oriented businesses.
But that was shocking last night, that I could do any business if it's not in the zoning code. You said that
Well,
courts would probably,
I think the best example of that we mentioned at last night's meeting was Walmart in Petoskey, right? That's probably the best local example because Emmett County didn't have any rules to say where they could be. And further, they went and said, we do not allow big box stores within Emmett County. And when you take a hard stance like that and say, we are just simply not going to permit this, you bring forth the ability to be challenged. And when Walmart wanted to come into Emmett County said, no, we don't allow big box stores. And they challenged that. And the Court of Appeals stated, because you don't allow for them anywhere in your community, you have to allow them. And because you haven't designated where they can be, we're going to say that they can be wherever they want. And similar court cases have happened regarding sexually oriented businesses. And so by trying to say, and that's one thing that some people have mentioned is both the 2005 code and the 2024 code proposed and said, here's where sexually oriented businesses can be.
Well, that's just an
And-
example, but there could be other things like casino downtown, you walked in, you know.
Yeah, well, I mean, that wouldn't be able to happen because I don't think we would be able to have a casino. The local tribe could, but they're outside of our zoning anyway.
Right.
Yeah. So that's why you will see some language in our code that some people say, well, why do we have this in here? And it's because through court decisions, we've found out we need to have some allowance for these things in certain locations so that we have some level of control to say we don't want it in these other areas, right? And I think one thing that I didn't cover last night that maybe should be covered is we also had some questions from people over the last week of what does by right use mean versus special land use? And that I think ties in because just because we have sexually oriented business in this in the zoning code, in the 2005 version, we permitted them in the CBD. In the new 2024 version, we proposed to move them to a more industrial area in the neighborhood, so it wasn't right downtown. But there's still a difference in the approval process, and that's really what by right versus special land use means, is you identify your three types of uses. Uses that you want to approve or allow in an area by right. Uses that you want to allow through special land use, and then uses that you say don't fit within that neighborhood, right? By right is basically identifying what the approval process would be, and that's more of an administrative approval. Do we need to have a planning commission meeting to discuss whether or not your neighbor should be able to build a deck in his backyard? Right, that seems like an overreach of the power that the city would need to have. And do we need to have that public discussion for smaller situations like that? Right, versus at the other end, you don't want to allow a large business to come into your downtown without having a discussion at the planning commission level, without getting input from your neighbors. And so that's a decision that the planning commission throughout the history of our zoning code has had to do, is look at the list of uses that we have and what the approval process is, which things we're comfortable having as by right uses and approvals versus special land use. So again, back to sexually oriented businesses.
Well, that's because you gave me that example last
Yeah,
night.
that's true. But
Yeah.
just because we have it in the code and we say they can be in this area, doesn't mean that they would just get to come in and do what they want and we wouldn't have any review through that process, right? We look at that and we say, no, if you're gonna do that type of a business, we're going to have that be a special land use. You're gonna have to come in and show how you can do that and fit within the community and not negatively impact the community. So there is a review process where the city could have, you know, some regulations that they would have to follow. At the same time, certain types of businesses we simply have to allow. At the open house the other night, I think it was, we looked at, there's a lot of new things in the zoning code that are by right in residential neighborhoods regarding like adult foster care, adult daycare, things of that nature. And we discussed that that is something that new legislation at the state level has said that you must have those in your code and have them as by right uses. So the new code has instituted those. Does that help? Is that?
Yes, but I also want to say that, I think the planning commission has done a really good job getting their information out. I'm not that, computer competent, but if I had a question, I called City Hall. If I wanted to find out where people were meeting, I just looked on the meetings are always on, the planning commission meetings are always on, on the calendar. I just think that personal citizens have to take some initiative. If you're not sure or you have a question, then call City Hall and they'll tell you. If they don't know, they'll tell you to call.
Yes, sir.
Sharon, got a question for you, if you don't mind.
No.
I understand you to be an opinion leader. I think, I sense that you're very involved in, legal Harbor Spring. So I think you may have been in a meeting, but maybe not. There appeared to be a consensus, this is, I guess, what I'm asking you, that in general, the code that was rejected in terms of its structure is much better than what we had. And the thought was, as I understand it, to use that code that's been rejected as the format to deal with amendments. Is that fair to say?
Slightly. What I think we were referring to was the idea that back in 2020, Beckett and Rader, 2021, Bill can confirm, did a modern update to the 2005 zoning code. And he changed it all around. He gave it an index. He made it clear. He made it searchable, things like that. And so it was that red line. It was that version that seemingly was already done back then. That we, that we said, wow, we have half of it done, more than half, maybe 80%. Because there was a lot of public relations about 80% of the code stayed the same and only 20% of it was changed. And so that's how we got that 80-20 conversation.
Right, so in terms of something for the planning commission to deal with, focusing on the code that was rejected, does that fit into that category? Where, yes, it's all those things searchable and organized, you can understand all that kind of stuff. And in it, maybe 20% has to be addressed. Is that fair?
We don't really know, but we would like to think that it's close.
Okay, if that's the case, that's the case.
Yeah, if that's the case, then Bill's, at each of these meetings, because there may be new people showing up that haven't heard it. I think we all may be in agreement that we don't have to go back to absolute square one, huh?
That's what I'm hearing.
Yeah,
So,
John?
so
No square one?
I think it would be an abject waste of time to go all the way back to square one and start
Yeah.
over.
Exactly.
So I guess for these guys, I'd say, okay. Tell us what it is. I don't think I've really heard that in a lot of these meetings yet. How can that be facilitated?
Well, are you asking me?
Sure.
You can, if not otherwise,
Right.
you're appointing your opinion leader.
Okay, all right, thank you. Yes, I think with the zoning aspects that Bill went over earlier, his list, we've got our list, you have your list.
I don't
John,
have.
you have a little. Yeah, John has his, Jeff, I know, has his. Talked to Al Dyka, he has a list of loopholes that he found to be, that needed changing, needed updating, things like that. Chip, he probably has a list, yes. So we just now have to pound those lists out and get them on a list so that Bill can talk about it on Thursday nights.
Yeah.
Here's this is a worksheet that I'm gonna present to planning commission tomorrow night, and it has each of those aspects that you just saw on that slide. And then a description of what's in the current code regarding those, and then what was in the repealed code number 439. And then worksheets for each person on the planning commission and the public to kind of pick what their preferred solution would be, what their backup solution would be.
would be helpful also for those who have, pinpoint views on a certain section. To provide that to you or to whoever on the planning commission.
They could, but, planning commission is gonna discuss each one of these, and then we're gonna draw on whatever input we have, but maybe Marie can summarize things from 3 or 5 nights of notes, and we're gonna do it live and, talk about the best solution for each of these aspects, and public's gonna get to weigh in. We'll all do it together.
If I can, I think to John's question, Karen's answer, if there are specifics that people are either for or against, that information is useful and should make its way to the planning commission. At that point, then you can begin to tabulate and you begin to really get some specificity as to what people like, what people don't like. So has Al Dyka submitted his list of loopholes?
Now, yeah, that was a conversation a long time ago, but it's always stuck with
Well,
me.
now,
Right,
it's the time
exactly.
is,
Yeah,
but the time is now. We
Yeah.
need
It- it-
specific.
Got specifics tonight, all right, but let's get them on paper.
Absolutely.
Might even be best to put a Tom Chris, Lynn Drive. Put a fixed date, we're taking comments till this day. After that, sayonara.
And be,
We gotta get this done.
Yeah, specific.
Nobody wants to go through this like it was last summer and fall. Nobody wants to do that.
but be specific, not, it's too dense. Okay, what's the density?
right.
Too close, what's too close? It's too big, what's too big? It's too tall.
What section, what's the,
Yeah.
citations and stuff. Now, I sense, and I could be wrong, that you're very involved in, writing stuff or in publishing, We Love Harbor Spring stuff.
Yes.
Could you publish that for your group
Mhm.
and get it out there?
Mhm.
And, what deadline would the commission want to put on?
Well, if I could make a request,
Sure.
I'd like to not just publish, like put it out on a website somewhere, but submit it to the city, right? If, in my opinion, and it's just my opinion, nothing would be more satisfying to me than someone reaching out and saying, this section of the code, section 10.4, whatever it is, I have a problem with this section. And here's what that problem is. And you don't even have to provide a specific direction of here's what I'd like it to say instead, but to say, here's the direction I think it needs to go in to be fixed. That can then be submitted to the planning commission for discussion and saying, remember, the community has this concern about this specific section, and then we can have an actual discussion. There might be people that are very in favor of certain sections of the code and liking those changes, but not liking another change. And I think it's important to hear what sections they like and don't like, so that we can have that discussion to modify the code to make it the best that it can be for everybody.
Bill, looking at the calendar that we have, what would be kind of the cutoff on those new ideas?
Good question.
We kind of outlined our schedule right there in the timetable with the public meetings, right?
Yeah, although, the real meat of the work, for the planning commission is gonna start this Thursday night and then continue into the meetings. So, the door is open. Door is open, but, I don't know what things we're gonna talk about at what meeting.
So would you say it's open through the 20th of February?
It would be the latest, yeah. Yeah.
Gail Everest, Fort Beach. And what is the best method of getting these lists to you, to the city, to Bill?
Jeff Grimm, zoning examiner.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay,
Anybody that has any thoughts or concerns, if they send me an email, make sure to specify, please provide this to the planning commission. But any of those emails that I get will be directed as correspondence to the planning commission for them to review, take into consideration when they're making changes.
Okay, or if you've got thoughts and questions at any of these meetings too.
Can I interrupt for a minute? What was the date, Bill, that you guys said?
February 20 would be
Yeah,
the,
let's use
20th.
February 20th.
that'd be the absolute latest.
Right.
All right, let's go with Margie Marks.
That would be Karen. February 20th.
Yeah, after Valentine's Day.
Margie, you there?
Hi, yes, I am. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Excellent. Thank you. Thanks for this opportunity. Thanks for all these meetings. I really just want to say that I'm happy to see that there is an improved format for the zoning code. And since it does exist and so much time and energy has gone into that, I would like to see that format used. It's notably better than the old one. The slide that you showed, Bill, I remember it well when I bought my property and wanting to do a few things, and it was like hieroglyphics trying to read that. So thank you for that. So I just really want to say for the record that it makes sense to me to invest all this, time and money and energy into this new zoning code. Good to hear even just tonight that it's not like we're rewriting the whole thing. So much work has already been done. I just would like to use the format that you have engineered. And I think it really speaks to us as a community that we're doing it this way. And I thank you.
Thank you, Margie. And let's go to Karen Donnelly online.
Unmute myself. Hi, Karen Donnelly at 644 Ann Street in Harbor, full-time resident here. I thank you, first of all, for all the time you're taking to get input from anybody that wants to ask questions or make comments about what's been done so far, and listening to all ideas and all sides of what people are thinking about all of this. Margie mentioned the format, and I did look at the complete book on zoning recently, and I find it really overwhelming to look at. I think the flow of it is difficult to follow. As if I were going to build a home, where would I even start to find the information I need to comply with the zoning requirements? So I threw together some ideas on paper of how that might flow from an introduction. If you're going to build a commercial building or you're going to build a home, whatever it ever, prevent some of the duplication of the flow when you get into the specifics by zone. And speaking of zones, have we officially looked at reducing the number of zones from 17 to a fewer number? I'm not sure where we're sitting with that right now, but there are many zones that probably could be combined into one, different residential zones. And then the requirements under those zones would be the same. They would be consistent. You wouldn't have to define every zone one by one, because if there's things that are consistent within the zones, then why duplicate it by putting down, every single detail of every single zone? And then there's a lot of terms that are used throughout. There needs to be a glossary of terms perhaps at the end, so you don't have to complete and redefine everything that's in the code one by one, by zone, by zone, by zone, because there's some common elements throughout each one. I think by doing that, I think you can also raise the questions about, what stands out to you, like the building heights, for example. Where does that apply? Does that apply to all zones? Does it only apply to the central business district? So by simplifying it in a flow and a process, as if you were going to ask for permission or getting the okay to build what you want to build, it just might be easier to find. Because when I look through it, and I haven't built a house myself, I've applied for some changes in my home, but nothing that big. So I just think it would just make it easier for people to follow and understand. I think we call forth some definition of terms that are duplicated throughout the whole entire document. So take it down from however many pages it is right now, 50 to 100 to maybe some fewer pages. So that's my thought.
Thanks, Karen. Can I just clarify one thing? You
Sure.
talked about you had reviewed the code and you had some concerns with the flow. Is that the now current building zoning code, the 2004-5 code?
Yes.
Is that the one you're looking at?
Yeah,
Okay.
that's what I had looked at, the complete book on that. Yes,
Got it.
I looked
Okay.
at that one. And I assume that means that we still have the 17 zones as we did before, and
That's
nothing really
correct.
changed in that regard. So, I think there's a lot of duplication, a lot of zones that are similar to each other, residential zones namely. And if you can hone those in and combine those and, where there's no differences, one by one. I think it's an iterative, like Jeff said, it kind of was an iterative process and, things got added as time went along. And then it just ended up being a little bit, I thought, a little bit more confusing or maybe harder to follow.
Great. Thanks for those comments, Karen.
Sure.
And I think now Matthew has a question. He's using his real hand rather than his virtual hand.
Yeah, I'm don't know how to raise a hand on virtually, so forgive me.
That's okay.
I 179 West Summit. I bought in 2023. So I've had conversations with Jim or Jeff Grimm about some adjustments to the house. And so I've dealt with the old code, now the new code. And I also have the new old code in my life. I'll talk about that in a little bit, but I want to talk in some generalities first. I think the city is going to be better off if we allow what I call incremental development by the citizens that actually own their houses. And anything in the code that prevents people from adding onto their properties in a classy way or acceptable way, creating those backyard cottages, having dwelling units that might not have size restrictions. I frankly was disappointed when, from the fear of the boogeyman of a mobile home, we were going to make people have cottages that were greater than 860 square feet in the old property. I'm trying to make it easy for people to add on and essentially have duplexes or triplexes, maybe being owner occupied. If you look at healthy neighborhoods with affordable housing, you have essentially extended families living in duplexes. Right across the street from me, Happy's got a full family in a house. I'm happy seeing that house thriving with kids parking on the street with their cars. That doesn't bother me. That's a thriving neighborhood. And anything that restricts through parking or size of a cottage, I think is poor for this city long-term in having affordable housing for people that are serving us in restaurants or at my mom's in Pineview Cottage, or the teacher in Harbor Springs. So if you want to talk about affordable housing, make it easy for people to have an owner-occupied duplex or triplex. If you're fearful of triplexes or duplexes, maybe have an owner-occupied restriction to it so you can have, because owner-occupied people have self-interests. I've owned 3 duplexes in my life. Trust me, I don't want someone living in the duplex with me that's not going to get along with me. So there's self-interest in having good neighbors in those units. And so the previous process, I thought there was a fear of these multi-unit buildings. I think the fear is unjustified if you want affordable housing in Harbor Springs. Look at the charming part of Harbor Springs, which I call below the bluff, around the city. There probably weren't zoning ordinances around when those houses were built with minimal setbacks, charming porches, neighbors on top of each other. I happen to live in a district now under the current code has setbacks that wouldn't allow me to build the porch that I'm going to be allowed to be built under the old code, the new code, now the old code. I worked to get my permit done before the vote, despite people telling me not to do anything because of frankly, the fear that was created by the vote. And so nearly 46% of the people wanted the now old code. That old code, which allows me to build a porch off the side of my house that I couldn't build with the current code. The setback, I think Jeff might be the setback wouldn't allow a porch. So I would encourage that we need a new code because the current code is restrictive in not letting people incrementally develop their own properties. I think it's sad that I couldn't build a porch on my house under the current code. Unfortunately, I got permits done before the vote, so I can build it. And I'm happy to share that with folks to see how an elegant porch off my property can't be done right now with the current code.
Great, thank you for your comments, Matthew. There's some really good ones in there. I saw numerous people in the room nodding their heads when you mentioned owner-occupied duplexes and triplexes. I think that's a nugget that we should consider as part of our discussion. I really liked that comment. So thanks, appreciate your input, Matthew. Chip, I don't think we've heard from you.
Chip Everett, 4 Beach Drive, proverbial Newfield animation. Question that is interesting to me, the owner occupied. Question would be, was there be a deed restriction on that property if that person were to sell it? The buyer, would he have to occupy it himself? I don't know how that would work.
Right.
And I certainly wouldn't have a problem with Matthew building an elegant porch, but what if it's not elegant? And so that's the issue I have with giving more openness to the existing, to the kind of the new model, the new zoning code.
But I guess I would reply, owners have a self-interest in having their properties look good. So I own the property on 179. It's an old brick church, so it sticks out a little bit like a sore thumb in the neighborhood anyways. But I hired an architect because if I'm going to build onto the property, I have a vested interest in that property retaining its value. So I think you got to trust the basic ownership structure that people aren't going to want to create something that looks ugly.
Great, thank you, Matt, for your comments again. Mr. Graham.
Tom Graham, 187 East Bluff. I think we gotta give some credence. You got a document here that's worked for about 50 years. Most things that get passed don't last that long. I think that document worked pretty well. I think I've worked with that zoning code probably more than anybody else in town. I've done condo conversions, subdivisions, built downtown, and lots of things. Always seem to work out, get the job done. Changing, I don't think doesn't need changing some, but the whole thing changing. I think the document itself worked.
Okay.
Was real good.
How do you feel about the risks that were identified?
Risk of what?
The adult businesses and the central business.
Well, if you allow them, I guess it's all right. Put them right next to the box.
And are good with mobile homes, R1B and C.
I don't like mobile homes. They just don't hold the value.
Before I go to annual comments, I do have an email submission here and through Karen that I'll briefly summarize and we'll put in the record tonight. This is from Nan Mounts. Thank you. She was hoping to zoom in tonight, although maybe she wasn't able to. I need some clarification on an item. This summer, she was given a list of permitted and special use buildings that can go in her RN neighborhood. And she's listed a bunch of, so it sounds like this came from the 2024 code where it's quite clearly laid out what is allowed and not allowed in RN. Things like accessory dwelling units, adult daycare, duplexes, home occupations. I'm just summarizing here. But the question is, are these state of Michigan requirements that said that we had to have all of those uses in a residential neighborhood? So not looking to necessarily answer that tonight, but I guess it was just a clarification that we maybe need to look into. Jeff, can you?
Yeah, if you look at the new code, particularly one area that I think is a nice addition that we didn't have before is there is a table with columns and rows.
Mm-hmm.
The columns indicate each of the different zoning districts and the rows indicate all of the uses. And what's lovely about that addition of the code is you can just go to that one section, you can look up either the district you're in and see what all the permitted uses are, or the use that you would like to do and see where you're able to do that. It also then lists what the approval process is, whether it's an administrative approval or special land use approval. But on that list, at the very end, there is a section that states something to the effect of like state required uses or something like that. And there's a list, most of them are related to adult care facilities and a few other things there. But yes, so there are some uses that we are required to have. And they also require certain types of approval, such as administrative or by right approvals for that. And that is something that's in the new code.
So looking at this list then, and the answer to the question is, some of them are state of Michigan requirements, but clearly others are not, like a duplex is not a state of Michigan requirement.
Correct, it's not.
Okay,
Yeah.
So it's a mixed list, Karen, is the
Thank you so
response.
much.
Yes, John.
If we're gonna use the rejected code as a format, could you guys publish in the same fashion that you publish this map? Because I don't think
There is a companion map to this that shows the 9 zoning codes. Is it still on the website or not?
I don't know if it's still on the website. We'll certainly bring that back up for review. Do we have, I think we have it on one of these things. I don't know. If it's,
Oh.
okay.
Package, for tomorrow night's meeting.
Okay.
Yep, right there.
You know, my interest is taking a look at the one that was rejected and the map and figuring it out and saying where I don't agree, because that's what I understand you guys need, and then state my reasons.
So this, if nowhere else, you can find it in the packet for tomorrow night's zoning planning commission meeting, which is accessible on the website. Karen.
So one of the things after we looked at all of the maps so many times, and we've tried to bring back to Bill that what we would really like would be to talk about the districts and how the different districts, the 19 districts, each have different needs. Some of the districts have certain requirements because of the kind of homes that are already there. Some of the other districts have different requirements because there's a lot of empty land in that district. And so when we first got started in our listening and our town halls, what we were thinking about is having districts, 2 or 3 districts per listening session. And so then the owners of the property owners of that home in that district would then be called to this meeting, and then they sit around and talk about their issues in their neighborhood. So that the neighborhood property owners could share what they wanted to change, what they were afraid of, what their fears were, and what their obligations were to their other neighbors for personal property and things like that. So what we wanted to do is to go back to talking about districts with Bill and not getting to the, because to me, this is a big sort of a dark hole here, this map with only nine districts, because it clumped everyone together. I have a lot of people that have talked to me about their short-term rentals and how the new map in the repealed zoning changed their short-term rental possibilities or potential and stuff. So anyway, back to the districts, Bill, I'll just throw that back to you, that we'd still like to continue looking at those.
I think that's first thing on the list.
Absolutely.
Tiff Easterwood, I should know this, but is the repealed code searchable online and searchable at this point? Yeah,
I'm not sure.
is it in paper somewhere?
Well, there's paper copies right here that people can go through. I know it was on the website and it was very, like right on the homepage. When we reverted back to the 2005 code, we wanted to make sure that that was readily available. So we replaced some of the links to the zoning code with the 2005 version.
Yeah, we could send anybody a PDF.
I just want to know how to compare, the best way to compare it.
We can certainly, email that. We may have it on there. I would just have to confirm where it's located. But
If you want to give Jeff, myself, or Bill your email address,
Yeah,
one of us will email it to you. Okay.
I'm talking for everyone too. I'm sure other people besides me would like to see the repealed code.
John,
Following up on what Karen was saying, if all of these people have all of these concerns about the consolidation of these zones, that sounds like another list to me. All you need to do is write down what these concerns are in specific, including the changes to the short-term rental profile, which I'm not sure changed that much. But if the planning commission, we have accessible, a list of specific concerns about this, they can be considered and they can either be explained or added to the list of things to consider for the change. That sounds like another very specific list to me.
time is now to get those concerns in, absolutely.
Yep.
One here and then Chip, and then we'll probably get close to wrapping up.
We touched a lot on property rights and owners' property rights, and this is the libertarian in me, but every zoning regulation is an infringement on someone's property. It's a pretty tough sell to tell me my family can't stay more than 3 weeks. They gotta leave. I want to see enforce that. I'd love to see Kyle come up and haul them off his house. There should be nothing in there that isn't necessary to achieve the objectives of the whole zoning code process. And I hope the commission takes that very seriously.
Good point. I'm getting a lot of inbound calls about the new code and things used by right, specifically about the adult daycare on residential property. And the answer is, well, the state is requiring us to do it. Is there another way we could say that? We have to make it so obvious in the charts and everything else, things like that can be built. I mean, not to hide it or anything, but it just, that's where a lot of my, they're gonna build an adult daycare next door to me. Well, they can by right now, and so but then I don't want the new code. So,
That's a change that comes to the code, whether we want it or not. If we don't adopt the new code, we have to add that into the old.
So how do we sell that better?
There's no sell. It's the state is telling us that has already happened.
Okay.
The sell would be, go to your legislators and tell them that you want that to repeal that law. That's really all that we really
but
can do.
I'm asking the planning commission, how do we sell that better?
Right, is there a different way to express that?
Right, exactly.
I hear you saying that you can put an adult daycare anywhere in the city.
Can't we choose a district for it?
No, if I remember correctly, let me look at the new code here. There's a list of certain types of adult facilities that they state must be by right uses in all residential neighborhoods. So I think we can, again, I'm not overly familiar with this. We just basically were given copies of the law from Beckett and Rader, who was very helpful in making sure that we complied with state regulations. There's state licensed facilities, adult daycares, foster care homes, family child care homes, things like that. Those are required to be permitted uses in residential neighborhoods. And so that's why we had to add that in there.
In residential areas.
Correct. We do not have them as permitted uses in non-residential areas. And that's, again, something that the state has kind of said, you will do. And this is something that all municipalities in the state of Michigan have to do. This isn't something unique to us that, we're just choosing to do. It's just kind of the direction the state has said we must go.
So for a sales tool, I would think that we would reach out to other communities and see what they've done. At least give us some fodder for decisions, huh?
Now, the use is required within residential areas. But the buildings themselves would have to comply to local zoning.
Yeah, it would
Setbacks.
need to
et
be
cetera.
setbacks, size.
So the
and things like
size
that.
is limited by the size. So, and I've had this conversation with a number of people. And if you do a back of the envelope calculation, what it would cost to build a facility that would comply with the actual requirements, that financial model will never work.
Yeah, just to support that, John. I mean, you've talked to Hildy, there's no way she could build a Pine View cottage in Harbor Springs. The economics just don't make sense. No, my self-interest, I'm trying to build my place so I can hopefully, if I get to the stage where my mom's in memory care, I have a couple of nurses living in my unit helping take care of me. I gotta believe since 45% of the properties are one owner in Harbor Springs, there's probably some other folks that might want to be thinking of that also.
All right, we are now a couple minutes after 7. One last chance for, for anybody to comment in. Loved it to be a very directed, specific, I want this to change kind of thing. If you can't do that tonight, please email them to Jeff, get them on the agenda for the planning commission. Sooner than later would be great. With that,
May I
yes.
just make an observation? So this is the third session that I've scribed on, and as I go through the transcription of the other 2 meetings, and I'll do that for this one too, I do see some coalescence around some main themes, and it's very encouraging to me personally as a resident that there is, open and honest communication and some coalescence and agreement, as well as the specifics. So all of that is really helpful. And I really commend people to come out for coming out tonight when it's so cold, and last night when it was horrible. And I think it's very important. And I just think this community hangs together, and it's just really great to see. So thank you all.
And I would like to say thank you to you, Margie. You're putting in a lot of work and effort here, a job that nobody else wants to do. So thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.